Before you speak to someone about Christ, before you respond online, before you enter that difficult conversation, remember this: pray first. Welcome to Before You Speak, a series about preparing our hearts before we open our mouths, because how we speak about Christ begins long before we ever say a word. Imagine you're about to walk into a difficult conversation. Maybe it's with your child, a friend, or a coworker, or maybe it's someone you've never met, but you're about to respond to a comment online. What do we usually do? We rehearse. We think through what we're going to say. We imagine their objections. We prepare our answers. Sometimes we even rehearse the entire conversation in our minds. But isn't it interesting? The very last thing we often do is pray. Somehow we've convinced ourselves that preparing our words is more important than preparing our hearts. But God's word points us in a different direction. James is writing to believers who are facing trials. In the middle of those trials, he reminds them that when they lack wisdom, God invites them to ask. Difficult conversations are certainly moments when we need his wisdom. Listen to what James writes. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. That's James 1:5. Notice what God invites us to ask for. Wisdom. Not simply the right words, not the perfect argument, not the clever response. Wisdom. The wisdom to know what to say, how to say it, when to say it, and sometimes whether to say anything at all. Prayer is one of the clearest ways we acknowledge that we need God's help. It reminds us that this conversation doesn't ultimately depend on our wisdom. It depends on his. Jesus also taught us something we must never forget. In John 15:5, he said, "For without me ye can do nothing." Without Christ, we can accomplish nothing of lasting spiritual value. We cannot change another person's heart. We cannot manufacture genuine conviction. We cannot give someone spiritual life. Those are works only God can accomplish. Prayer reminds us of our place. We are faithful witnesses. God is the one who changes hearts. There's a sentence I hope you'll remember long after this video ends. Before you speak to people about God, talk to God about people. Prayer is not preparing God for the conversation. Prayer is one of the ways God prepares us for the conversation. Sometimes prayer changes my words. Sometimes it changes my attitude. Sometimes it changes my timing. Sometimes it changes whether I should speak at all. Have you ever prayed about a conversation and realized, I don't need to win this argument. I need to love this person? That's what prayer does. God begins changing us through prayer before he uses us. James gives us another reminder. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. James 1:19. Praying first can help us slow down. Instead of reacting, we begin responding. Instead of speaking from frustration, we begin speaking from dependence. Prayer has a way of quieting our hearts before we ever open our mouths. Paul writes in Colossians 4:6, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt. Notice that. Our speech should be marked by grace. That doesn't mean we avoid the truth. It means the truth is spoken with the character of Christ. And that's exactly what prayer begins producing in us. So what does praying first actually look like? It doesn't have to be a long prayer. Before your next conversation, you might simply pray, Lord, give me wisdom. Help me love this person. Guard my words. Keep me humble. Help me represent Christ well and do what only you can do. That prayer takes less than a minute, but it may completely change the conversation that follows. Jesus gave us the perfect example. On the night before his crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus didn't rush ahead in his own strength. He prayed. He submitted himself to his Father's will. If the sinless Son of God sought the Father's will before facing his greatest trial, how much more should we seek him before entering our conversations? Prayer reminds us that every conversation belongs to God before it belongs to us. The world tells us to speak our minds. God's word teaches us to seek his heart. So before you speak to people about God, talk to God about people. Before your next conversation, what will you remember? How will it change the way you speak? I'm Toby, and this is Cross and Grace Ministries, because no one is beyond grace.